Have you ever been broken by life? Not just tired, broken. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. The kind of broken where you wake up and you don't know who you are anymore. Where everything you built is gone. Where the people you trusted are gone. Where even hope feels too heavy to carry. If you have felt that this lesson is for you, this lesson is for English learners who want strength, not just words. It is for your mind, your heart, and your future. Today we go back 2,000 years to a man who lost everything. Not once, twice. And who sat down, picked up a pen, and wrote some of the most powerful words the world has ever read. His name was Lucius Annaeus Seneca. He was born in Spain around 4 BC and raised in Rome. He became a lawyer, a writer, a philosopher, and one of the most famous men in the Roman Empire. He advised emperors. He filled great theaters with his plays. He was respected, admired, and wealthy. And then one day, the emperor decided Seneca was dangerous. He was sent away, exiled to a small island called Corsica. No more power, no more wealth, no more influence, just rock and sea and silence. Most men would have collapsed. Most men would have spent their days angry, bitter, full of questions. Why me? What did I do wrong? When will this end? Seneca did something different. He wrote, not letters of complaint, not diaries of despair. He wrote about strength, about the mind, about how a human being can face the worst that life offers and come out of it not just alive, but better. And the lesson he kept coming back to, the one idea that runs through all his writing like a river, is this: difficulty does not break you. Difficulty builds you. That is what we are going to talk about today. 7 lessons from Seneca and the Stoic philosophers of ancient Rome. 7 ideas that are over 2,000 years old and still more true than most things you will read this year. You don't need to be a philosopher to understand them. You just need to be a human being who has faced something hard. And if you're listening to this, I think you are. Lesson 1. Fire tests everything. The Stoics had an idea that most people never hear. It says this: the universe does not punish you when things go wrong. It tests you. Think about what that means for a moment. Not punishment, not bad luck, not the universe being cruel. A test. A deliberate, necessary, unavoidable test. Seneca believed this completely, and he had reason to believe it, because life tested him in ways that most of us will never experience. When he was exiled to Corsica, everything was taken from him. His home, his money, his freedom. Everything that defined him as a powerful Roman man gone in a single imperial decree. One letter from the emperor, and it was gone. But here is what Seneca noticed. The men around him who had comfortable lives, who had never faced real hardship, who had never lost anything important, those men were fragile. When difficulty came for them, even small difficulty, they fell apart. They had no muscle for it, no practice, no experience of surviving hard things. Seneca, even in exile, had something they did not have. He had been tested, and the test had not destroyed him. It had revealed him. This is the first lesson of the Stoics. Adversity does not come to destroy you. It comes to show you what you are made of. Most people see hard times as punishment. Seneca saw them as preparation. The Stoics had an ancient image they loved, the image of fire and gold. You put raw gold into a fire and it gets hot. It gets uncomfortable. It looks for a moment like it might be destroyed. But what happens? The fire burns away everything that is not gold. The impurities rise to the surface and disappear. What is left is purer, stronger, more valuable than before. That is what adversity does to a human being. The fire of hard times burns away the parts of you that were never truly yours. The borrowed confidence, the comfortable habits, the identity that depended on other people's approval. And what is left, what survives the fire that is the real you. Fire tests gold. Suffering tests brave men. Seneca wrote those words from an island, far from Rome, far from power, far from everything he had built, and he did not write them with anger. He wrote them with the calm certainty of a man who had already been through the fire and already knew what he was made of. Think about the fires in your own life, the job you lost, the relationship that ended, the plan that failed, the year that broke your heart. Those were not punishments. Those were tests. And you're still here, which means you passed them. Maybe not perfectly. Maybe with tears and confusion and long nights of doubt. But you passed them. The question the Stoics ask is not, why did this happen to me? The question is, what is this turning me into? Lesson 2. The comfortable life is a trap. Here is something that nobody tells you when life is going well. Comfort is dangerous. Not comfort like rest or peace or a quiet evening at home. That kind of comfort is good. That kind of comfort is necessary. The dangerous kind of comfort is the kind that goes on too long, the kind that becomes your whole life, the kind where nothing ever goes wrong, nothing ever challenges you, nothing ever asks anything difficult of you. Seneca had a name for this. He called it the soft life. And he believed it was one of the most destructive things that could happen to a person. You know what's strange? The people we admire most in history were almost never people who had easy lives. Think about the names that stayed. The thinkers, the builders, the leaders who changed things. Almost all of them went through something hard. Not in spite of their greatness, but because of it. The difficulty was part of the making. Seneca practiced something the Stoics called voluntary hardship. This means choosing on purpose to make your life a little harder than it needs to be. Not because you enjoy suffering, but because you want to stay ready. He would sometimes eat simple food for days, even when he could afford better. He would wear plain clothes. He would sleep without luxury, not as punishment, as practice. His reasoning was clear. If I practice living with less, then losing things will never destroy me. I already know I can survive without them. It is not about being extreme. It is about being prepared. Think about a man, someone you might know, who had a steady job for 15 years, good salary, comfortable routine. He never had to fight for anything because everything was already there. And then one day, the company closed, and he fell apart. Not because he was weak, but because he had never built the muscle for hard times. He had no experience of losing something and rebuilding. The comfort had made him fragile without him ever knowing it. It's not about having money. It's about not needing it. It's about knowing you can survive without it. The freedom the Stoics were after was not what most people imagine, not the freedom of having everything. The freedom of needing very little. Because a person who can be happy with little cannot be destroyed by loss. You cannot threaten someone who has already learned to live without. A life with no struggle is not a good life. It is simply a fragile one. A calm sea never made a skilled sailor. That sentence sounds simple, but sit with it for a moment. The sailor who only ever sailed in perfect weather, who never faced a storm, who never had to fight the wind and the current, and the fear that sailor is not a good sailor. That sailor is a passenger who happens to be holding a wheel. The storm is not your enemy. The storm is your teacher. And the Stoics say this: you do not need to wait for the storm to come to you. You can go to the storm. You can choose in small ways every day to make yourself harder to break. Lesson 3. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. Some suffering has nothing to do with what is actually happening to you. It happens in your head, at night mostly, when the house is quiet and there is nothing to distract you. Your mind starts to move. It picks up a worry, a fear, a problem that has not happened yet. And it begins to build. What if I lose my job? What if the relationship ends? What if I get sick? What if everything falls apart? And by the time your mind is done, it has constructed a disaster so large, so complete, so detailed, that you are already exhausted from living through something that has not yet occurred. Seneca noticed this. He wrote about it clearly. He said that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. That most of the pain we carry is not from what has happened, but from what we are afraid might happen. From the stories we tell ourselves in the dark. Now think about your own life for a moment. Go back to the last time you were deeply afraid of something. The days or weeks before it happened. The weight of it. The way it followed you. And then think about what actually happened when it arrived. Was it as bad as you had imagined? Was the reality as dark as the version your mind had built? Most of the time it was not. This is not to say that real pain is not real. It is. Loss is real. Failure is real. Grief is real. But the Stoics understood something important. The mind has a way of multiplying pain before it arrives, of making it bigger, wider, more permanent than it truly is. There was a man named Epictetus. He was born a slave in ancient Greece. He had no freedom, no property, no rights. His master, a cruel man, once decided to test him. He grabbed Epictetus by the leg and began to twist it, to break it. Epictetus looked at him calmly and said, "You're going to break it." The master twisted harder. The bone cracked. Epictetus said, "I told you so." That story has stayed in history for 2,000 years, not because it is comfortable, but because it shows something extraordinary about the human mind. Epictetus did not multiply the pain. He did not imagine a future of suffering and collapse. He stayed exactly where he was in the present moment with what was actually happening. If your fear grows at night, if your mind builds walls out of shadows, if your worry is always bigger than the problem itself, then Epictetus has something to tell you. The pain in your imagination is not the truth. It is just a story your fear is telling, and you can learn to tell a different one. A weak mind multiplies the pain. A strong mind shrinks it down to its actual size. This does not come from pretending things are fine. It comes from practice, from learning slowly to separate what is real from what your fear has added on top. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. That sentence from Seneca is not a comfort. It is a challenge. It is asking you to look carefully at what you are actually facing and to stop carrying the weight of a disaster that has not arrived yet. Lesson 4. You cannot control what happens. You can control you. There is one idea at the very center of Stoic philosophy. One idea that everything else grows from. And it is this. There are things in this world you can control, and there are things you cannot. And the whole art of living well is learning to know the difference. The Stoics called this the dichotomy of control, the separation between what is yours and what is not. What is yours, your thoughts, your choices, your effort, your attitude toward what happens to you. These things belong to you completely. No one can take them. No emperor, no illness, no disaster. What is not yours? Everything else. The weather, other people's opinions, whether you get the job, whether the person you love stays, whether the economy rises or falls, whether the world is fair. Most people spend most of their lives fighting for control over things that are not theirs, and losing, and feeling broken by the losing. Because you cannot win a fight over something that was never yours to control. Marcus Aurelius understood something that most emperors never did. He had more power than almost any human being who has ever lived. He commanded armies. He decided the fate of nations. Millions of people obeyed his word. And yet, in his private journal, the one he never intended for anyone else to read, he wrote again and again about the limits of control, about accepting what could not be changed, about focusing only on what was truly his to decide. He ruled during the Antonine Plague, one of the worst disease outbreaks in Roman history. Millions died, soldiers fell, citizens too. He lost his son, and he kept governing. He kept writing. He kept showing up, not because he was not in pain, but because he had decided that his response to pain was the one thing he would never surrender. Ordinary people react. Stoic people respond. Reacting means letting the outside world write your inside story. Something bad happens and you become the bad thing. You're angry because of the anger. You're broken because of the breaking. The outside controls the inside. Responding means pausing, even for one breath, and choosing. Choosing how you carry this. Choosing what it means. Choosing who you are going to be inside of it. That pause, that single breath between what happens and what you do next. That is where your freedom lives. That is the only place it has ever lived. Hard times don't break you. Hard times build you, but only if you respond instead of react. If this lesson is speaking to something inside you, something you needed to hear today, subscribe to this channel and keep going. There are 3 more lessons ahead, and the next one might be the most important of all. Now here is the practical question. How do you actually do this? How do you pause when everything in you wants to explode? How do you respond when your heart is already reacting? Stoic practice was simple. When something difficult happened, they would ask themselves one question: is this in my control? If yes, they acted. If no, they released it. Not with denial, not with pretending it didn't hurt, but with a clear-eyed decision to stop pouring energy into a fight they could not win. The storm is not yours to stop. Your sails are yours to set. What people say about you is not yours to manage. What you believe about yourself is. You cannot control what you lose. You can control what you build next. None of this is easy. The Stoics never said it was easy. Marcus Aurelius wrote his journal partly because he needed to remind himself of these things every single day. Even the man with all the power in the world needed the daily practice of letting go of what was not his. So do you. So do all of us. Lesson 5. Find meaning in the pain. There is a difference between surviving hard times and being changed by them. Most people survive. They get through. They endure the months of difficulty and come out the other side and return to their lives and try to forget. They carry the scar, but they don't carry the lesson. The hard time passed through them and left nothing behind except the memory of pain. The Stoics wanted something more than survival. They wanted transformation. The Stoics and later philosophers had a Latin phrase they loved: amor fati. It means love of fate, not just acceptance of fate, not just tolerance of fate. Love. The idea is simple. Everything that happens to you, the good and the terrible, is part of what you are becoming. That the pain is not separate from your story. The pain is your story. And when you stop fighting it and start asking what it is trying to give you, something shifts. Viktor Frankl was not a Stoic. He was an Austrian doctor who lived in the 20th century. But he proved what the Stoics knew better than almost anyone who has ever lived. In 1944, Frankl was taken to Auschwitz. He lost his wife. His manuscript, years of work, was destroyed. He was stripped of everything a human being can be stripped of. And in the middle of that darkness, he made a discovery that would become one of the most important ideas of the century. He noticed that the prisoners who survived, not just physically but mentally, were the ones who found meaning. Not the ones who were strongest, not the ones who were angriest. The ones who could look at what was happening to them and find a reason to keep going. A person they loved, a book they still wanted to write. A belief that their suffering was not pointless. Meaning did not make the pain smaller, but it made the pain bearable, and bearable was enough to survive. Some people survive hard times. Others are transformed by them, deeply, permanently changed into someone they could not have become any other way. Think about a young student who failed her exams 3 times. The first time she cried and tried again. The second time she almost gave up. The third time she sat in her small room and asked herself a question she had never asked before. What is this trying to teach me? Not about the exams, about herself, about how she worked, how she thought, what she truly wanted. That question changed everything. The 4th time she passed. But more than that, she knew herself in a way she never had before the failures. The Stoics would say this: You cannot always choose your path, but you can choose what it means. A wound that teaches you something is not just a wound. It becomes a turning point. A loss that reveals what truly matters to you is not just a loss. It becomes a clarification. This is not about pretending the pain was good. It was not good. It hurt. It cost you something real. But here on the other side of it, ask the honest question. Who would you be if that hard thing had never happened? Would you be stronger? Would you know yourself as well? Would you have the depth, the patience, the quiet confidence that difficulty gave you? The question is whether you are willing to let them. Lesson 6. Endure without complaining. Here is the hardest truth of all. Nobody is coming to save you. Not your family, not your friends, not the government, not luck. Not the universe with some hidden plan that makes everything work out perfectly in the end. When life gets hard, truly hard, the only thing standing between you and being destroyed by it is you. That sounds lonely. Maybe it is. But the Stoics would say it is not a reason to despair. It is a reason to grow. Because the moment you stop waiting for rescue is the moment you start becoming someone who does not need it. Seneca was returned to Rome after his exile. For a while, things were better. He was powerful again, respected again, wealthy again. And then Nero, the emperor he had tutored since childhood, the young man he had shaped and educated and believed in, turned on him. Seneca was accused of plotting against the emperor. The evidence was thin. The verdict was certain. Nero sent a soldier to Seneca's house with a message. The message was not a punishment. It was an order. Seneca was to take his own life. He was 70 years old. He gathered his friends around him. He spoke to them calmly. He reminded them that the principles he had written about for decades, the principles of endurance, of courage, of meeting fate without flinching, those principles were not just words on paper. They were a way of living and a way of dying. There was no complaint from him, no begging, no rage against the unfairness of it. He endured. Not every wound needs an audience. Not every pain needs a post. Not every hard day needs an explanation to someone who was not there. This is one of the most countercultural ideas the Stoics had. We live in a world that encourages us to share our suffering loudly, to perform our pain, to seek comfort from as many people as possible. And sometimes that is right. Sometimes we need to be heard. But there is another kind of strength that the Stoics admired. The strength that does not perform. The strength that shows up on a hard Tuesday morning without telling anyone. It is hard. That does its work quietly. That carries its weight without asking to be praised for carrying it. Loudly, suffering is easy. Quietly, enduring is strength. Hard times don't break you. Hard times build you. But the building happens in private. It happens in the moments nobody sees. The ones where you chose to keep going when stopping would have been so much easier. Seneca lost everything twice. He was exiled once and lost his freedom. He was sentenced once and lost his life. And between those two losses, he wrote some of the most enduring wisdom in human history. Letters that are still read. Ideas that are still alive. Words that are reaching you right now across 2,000 years. He did not endure in silence because he had nothing to say. He endured in silence because he understood that complaining changes nothing, that the energy spent on bitterness is energy stolen from building. The Stoics did not ask you to feel nothing. They asked you to feel everything and keep moving anyway. There will be mornings when the weight feels impossible, when you cannot see why any of this is worth it. When the fire has been burning so long you have forgotten what it felt like to be warm. On those mornings, remember Seneca, sitting in a small house on a cold island, writing letters about strength, not because life was easy, because it was not. The difficulty does not destroy you, it builds you, even when the building hurts. Lesson 7. Hard times reveal who you are. We have talked about fire. We have talked about comfort and its quiet danger. We have talked about the suffering that lives in imagination, about the things we cannot control, about meaning, found in the middle of pain, and about the strength that endures without needing an audience. Now, here is where all of it comes together. Hard times do not create your character. They reveal it. Everything that was already inside you, the courage, the patience, the stubbornness, the love, the capacity to keep going. When everything says, stop, it was always there, but it was sleeping, covered by the ordinary days, hidden under the routine and the comfort and the life you had built around yourself. And then the hard time came, and everything that was not essential fell away. And what was left was you, the real you, the one that exists underneath the roles you play and the image you protect, and the version of yourself you show to the world. Adversity does exactly this. It strips the unnecessary away and shows you the structure underneath. Some people look at that structure and feel afraid. They do not recognize themselves without the comfortable life around them. Without the job, the relationship, the certainty, they feel small, exposed, lost. The Stoics would say something different. What you are seeing is not smallness. It is truth. And truth, even when it is uncomfortable, is always the beginning of something. Think about everything the hard times in your life have taken from you. The things you lost. The plans that did not work. The people who left. The versions of yourself that could not survive what happened. Ask yourself what stayed, what could not be taken, what you discovered you were made of when the easier things were gone. That is your foundation. That is the part of you that Seneca was writing about from his island, that Marcus Aurelius was protecting through plague and war, that Epictetus kept whole even when someone broke his leg and called him property. The foundation does not care about your circumstances. It only grows stronger when the circumstances are hard. You were not broken by what happened to you. You were being built by it. Every loss was removing something that was not strong enough to last. Every failure was redirecting you towards something truer. Every hard morning was adding one more quiet layer to the person you are becoming. And now, after everything, after the fire and the silence and the long nights and the weight you carried without anyone seeing you, are beginning to understand what the Stoics knew. You were never as fragile as you feared. You were never as alone as you felt. You were always underneath everything someone who could survive this. You were not broken. You were being built. 7 lessons, 2,000 years old, still true. Adversity is not punishment, it is preparation. Comfort when it goes on too long makes us fragile without us knowing. The suffering we imagine is almost always larger than the suffering that actually arrives. We cannot control what happens to us, but we will always have the power to choose how we respond. Meaning turns pain into something we can carry. Endurance, quiet and without complaint, is one of the highest forms of strength. And hard times, all of them, every single one, reveal the person we were always becoming. Seneca knew all of this, not from reading, because he lived it. Because life took everything from him and he chose every time to keep writing, to keep thinking, to keep building something true. And so can you. If this lesson spoke to something inside you today, I would love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, what is the hardest thing you have ever faced? And what did it teach you about yourself? I read every comment. Your answer might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. If you are not subscribed yet, please subscribe now. There are more lessons like this one coming, and I do not want you to miss them. Keep learning English every day, keep listening, and keep growing. Until next time, take care of yourself, and remember what Seneca knew: you are stronger than you think.